Amara was just a simple girl from Lagos, the kind of girl who still believed in true love. When she met Tund, it felt like a dream come true. He was charming, confident, and knew exactly what to say to make her feel special. Their story started with late-night calls, surprise dinners, sweet messages, and thoughtful gifts. For the first time in her life, Amara felt like she had found the man who would protect her, love her, and give her the life she always imagined. Everyone around her admired their relationship. Friends would say, "Amara, you're so lucky. Tund is every woman's dream." And she believed it. She believed every promise he whispered about building a home together, raising kids, and never letting her down. It was easy to fall deeper when he made her feel like the center of his world. But slowly, little cracks began to show, cracks that Amara tried to cover with love. Sometimes, Tund would snap over the smallest things, like her talking too long on the phone or laughing too loud with her friends. He wanted to know where she was every minute, who she was with, and why. If she questioned him, he'd brush it off with a smile and say, "I just care about you too much." Amara told herself it was love, not control. Deep down, she felt something was off. But when you're blinded by the idea of forever, it's easy to ignore the red flags and hold on to the illusion of love. When Amara found out she was pregnant, her whole world lit up. She imagined running into the bedroom with the test in her hand, smiling and watching Tund lift her up with joy. She pictured him holding her close and promising to be the best father. That's how it was supposed to be. So when she finally told him the news, her heart was racing with excitement. She whispered, "Tund, we're going to have a baby." But instead of happiness, his face went blank. There was no smile, no hug, no celebration. He simply nodded and said, "Oh, okay." That was it. No fireworks, no excitement. From that moment, things began to change. Tund started staying out late, coming home tired and irritable. The sweet man who once held her hand and planned their future together was slowly becoming a stranger. Amara tried to convince herself that he was just shocked, that maybe he needed time to adjust. But in her heart, the distance was sharp and painful. She tried harder, cooking his favorite meals, speaking softly, avoiding arguments, hoping to bring back the warmth they once shared. But it only seemed to annoy him more. His words became harsher, his patience thinner. The man she loved was slipping away, and she didn't know how to stop it. Then one evening, over something so small, something as simple as Amara asking where he had been, Tund snapped. His voice rose, his eyes burned with anger, and before she could even process it, his hand struck her face. The sound echoed louder in her ears than the pain itself. For a moment, the world around her froze. She touched her cheek in disbelief, her tears falling faster than she could stop them. Her heart shattered. This wasn't just about the slap. It was the realization that the man she had trusted with her life, the father of her unborn child, had crossed a line she never thought he would. As she stood there trembling, one thought kept repeating in her mind. Is this the same man I married? Is this the same man who once swore he'd never hurt me? That night, Amara cried herself to sleep, holding her stomach protectively. For the first time, fear entered her love story. She wasn't just thinking about herself anymore. She was thinking about the tiny life inside her. And deep down, she knew things were only going to get harder. Amara's life slowly turned into something she never imagined. After the slap, things didn't get better, they got worse. Tund became more controlling every single day. At first, he would complain if she spent too much time on the phone with her mother. Then he started telling her not to visit her friends. Soon he took her phone away completely, saying, "You don't need distractions. Just focus on me." Amara felt her world shrinking, piece by piece, until it was only him and his rules. Money was another chain. If she wanted anything, even small things like soap or food cravings during pregnancy, she had to ask Tund for it. Sometimes he gave it, sometimes he refused, depending on his mood. She had no bank card, no savings, no independence. For a girl who once dreamed of freedom and joy, it felt like being locked in a cage with no key. Her only comfort was her unborn baby. Every day when she felt hopeless, she would take out her ultrasound photo and stare at it for long minutes. The tiny shape inside reminded her that she wasn't completely alone. She would whisper softly, "I'm doing this for you. You're the reason I'll survive this." That picture became her source of strength, the only light in her dark prison. The house that once felt like a home now felt like a jail. The walls were the same, but the air was heavy. She had no one to talk to, no one to cry to. Sometimes she stood by the window, watching people walk freely on the street, laughing, living their lives, and she wondered if she'd ever feel that free again. What made it harder was Tun's unpredictable moods. One day he would act normal, even smile and bring food. The next day, he would shout at her for no reason, slam doors, or accuse her of things she didn't do. Amara felt like she was walking on eggshells, never knowing what would set him off. She began to feel invisible. Her voice didn't matter, her choices didn't matter, her happiness didn't matter. It was as if her whole identity was fading away. And yet, even in the middle of that loneliness, she clung to one hope, that one day she would hold her baby in her arms, and that child would be her freedom. Every night before she closed her eyes, she touched her stomach and prayed silently, "Please, God, give me strength. Help me survive this. For my baby." In those moments, she realized something powerful. Even though Tund had taken her phone, her friends, her family, and even her freedom, he could not take away her will to protect her child. And that small fire of determination was the only thing keeping her alive in her prison. The night it happened, Amara would never forget. The argument started small, like most of them did. She had simply asked Tund why he came home so late, her voice soft, her eyes tired. Instead of answering, his anger exploded like fire. His words were sharp, cutting her like a knife. She tried to stay calm, reminding herself not to raise her voice, not to make him angrier. But then, in a sudden burst of rage, he shoved her hard against the wall. For a moment, everything went silent. The only sound Amara could hear was her own heartbeat, loud and frantic. She felt her stomach twist, her arms instinctively wrapping around her belly. A wave of fear washed over her, the kind of fear she had never known before. Not for herself, but for the tiny life growing inside her. What if something happens to my baby? The thought screamed in her head louder than Tund's yelling. She sank down slowly, her hands trembling as she tried to breathe. Tears blurred her eyes as she whispered to her unborn child, "Please, please be okay." She didn't care about the pain in her back or the sting of humiliation. The only thing that mattered was whether her baby was safe. Tund, realizing what he had done, didn't apologize. He simply muttered something under his breath and stormed out of the room, leaving her shaking and broken on the floor. That was the moment the illusion completely shattered. The dream of a loving husband, the hope that things would get better, it all vanished. As Amara sat in the dark that night, holding her stomach protectively, something inside her shifted. She realized she couldn't keep living like this, waiting for the next slap, the next scream, the next shove. It wasn't just her life at risk anymore. It was her child's. She whispered to herself over and over, "I will not let him hurt my baby. I will not." That decision burned deep into her soul like fire. She didn't know how, she didn't know when, but she knew she had to find a way out. The fear she felt that night transformed into determination. She would survive, not for herself, but for the little heartbeat inside her. As she lay in bed, unable to sleep, she stared at the ceiling and replayed everything that had happened since she met Tund. The dinners, the gifts, the promises. They were all lies compared to the reality of his violence. And now, more than ever, she understood one truth. Love should never come with bruises, with tears, or with fear. That night, Amara made a silent vow to her baby. "No matter what it takes, I will protect you. I will get us out of here. You will not grow up in fear." It was no longer just a hope. It was a promise, carved deep into her heart. Amara knew escape would not happen overnight. After that terrifying night when Tund pushed her, she understood that every step she took had to be careful, quiet, and hidden. If he ever found out she was planning to leave, things could get even more dangerous. So she started small. Whenever Tund gave her money for food or household things, she would keep a little aside. Just a few naira here, a few naira there. It wasn't much, but slowly, the coins and notes began to add up. Every time she tucked a bill under her clothes or into a secret corner of her bag, her heart pounded with both fear and hope. She also began building trust with people outside the house. little by little. The market women, the pharmacist, the neighbors. But the most important was the taxi driver who sometimes dropped her home from appointments. His name was Chaik, a kind man with gentle eyes who often asked if she was okay. At first she never answered honestly. But one day, when she couldn't hold back her tears, she told him a little piece of her truth. Chaik didn't judge, he didn't pity. He just nodded and said, "When you are ready, I'll help you." Those words stayed in her heart like a lifeline. But the most powerful weapon Amara had was a secret Tund didn't know about. Hidden deep in her old suitcase were documents. Property papers from her late father. The land was in her name, and Tund had no idea it even existed. Whenever she touched those papers, she felt a spark of courage. That land was more than just property. It was her chance at a new beginning, her proof that she could build a life away from him. Amara became an actress in her own home. She smiled when Tund wanted her to smile, kept quiet when he shouted, pretended to be the obedient wife he thought she was. But in her heart she was planning, waiting, counting the days. Every ultrasound photo she looked at reminded her that she wasn't just saving herself, she was saving her baby. At night, when Tund snored beside her, she would lie awake, whispering her plans in her head like prayers. One day soon I'll leave. One day soon we'll be free. Sometimes she imagined herself holding her baby in a small but safe house, maybe working with her own hands to earn a living, maybe even smiling again. Those dreams gave her strength to face each day. She knew it would take courage. She knew it would be dangerous. But every coin she saved, every quiet word she shared with Chaik, every glance at those property documents brought her closer to freedom. Amara wasn't just surviving anymore. She was preparing for the fight of her life, the fight to break free and protect her child's future. The night Amara escaped felt like something out of a movie, only it was her real life. She had been planning for weeks, but still, her hands shook as the clock ticked toward 2 a.m. Tund was in the bedroom, snoring loudly, his phone face down on the table. The house was dark and quiet, but inside Amara's chest, her heart was beating like a drum. She whispered a silent prayer, touched her belly gently and told her baby, "Tonight we're leaving." Her small suitcase was already hidden under the bed, packed with the little clothes she owned, the secret money she had saved, and most importantly, the ultrasound photo. That photo was the very first thing she placed on top of her bag, because it reminded her why she was doing all this. She was not just running away from Tund, she was running towards safety for her child. At exactly 2 o'clock, she grabbed the phone she had hidden and typed one word to Chaik, the taxi driver. Now! Her fingers trembled as she pressed send. Within minutes, she heard the faint hum of a car engine waiting quietly down the street. She tiptoed out of the room, every creak of the floor making her freeze in fear. She imagined Tund waking up, grabbing her arm, dragging her back. But she pushed those thoughts away and kept moving. When she reached the front door, her chest tightened. This was it, the moment her whole life would change. With shaky hands, she turned the key slowly, praying it wouldn't make a sound. The door opened, and the cool night air hit her face. Felt like freedom. She clutched her suitcase, stepped out, and closed the door behind her without looking back. For the first time in months, she was outside the house without fear of who was watching, without feeling like a prisoner. Chaik was already waiting. The taxi lights dimmed so no one would notice. He jumped out and helped her with the suitcase, whispering, "Quick, get in." Amara slid into the back seat, holding her stomach protectively. As the car pulled away, she kept her eyes forward. She didn't dare look back at the house she once thought was her home. That house held too many lies, too much pain. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were mixed with relief. She wasn't completely free yet, but the hardest step had been taken. She was no longer just dreaming of escape, she was living it. With every passing streetlight, with every turn of the wheels, Amara felt lighter. She looked down at the ultrasound photo in her hands and whispered, "We made it, baby. We're going to be safe now." In that quiet taxi, in the middle of the night, Amara finally tasted freedom, and she promised herself she would never go back. When Amara arrived in Enugu, it felt like stepping into another world. The journey had been long and exhausting, but when she finally stood in front of her late father's old house, tears filled her eyes. The house wasn't perfect, It was old, the paint peeling, the windows cracked, the roof leaking in some corners. But to Amara, it was more beautiful than any mansion Tund could have ever given her. Why? Because here there was no shouting, no fear, no violence. For the first time in a long time she felt safe. Her first night in that house was quiet. She slept on a thin mattress on the floor, hugging her stomach, listening only to the sound of crickets outside. No footsteps, no doors slamming, no heavy breathing of an angry man beside her. "There's peace," she whispered to her unborn baby. "This is home now. It's not much, but it's ours." And with that thought, she drifted into the deepest sleep she'd had in months. The days that followed were not easy. Amara quickly realized that starting over meant real struggle. She had no steady income, no savings beyond the small money she had brought, and a baby on the way. But she refused to let despair win. With determination, she looked around for work and finally found a small tailoring shop that needed extra hands. She had always been good at sewing, something she learned from her mother, and now it became her lifeline. The shop was not glamorous, and the pay was little, but every stitch she made felt like a step toward freedom. She would sit by the sewing machine, her back aching, her hands sore, but her heart steady. Customers began to notice her neat work, and soon people were asking specifically for the new girl Amara. That little recognition gave her hope that she could build something of her own one day. Life was hard. Some days she went to bed hungry, some days she worried about the future, some days she felt the weight of being alone. But the difference was clear. She was struggling in freedom, not in captivity. Every night, when she closed the door of her father's old house and lay down, she knew she would not be woken by violence. She could finally sleep without fear. Sometimes she sat outside on the small veranda, watching children play in the street, imagining her own baby running around one day, laughing without worry. That vision kept her strong. She would smile softly and whisper, "Better days are coming." Amara's new life was not perfect, but it was hers. Every morning she woke up with fresh determination, and every night she went to sleep with peace in her heart. For the first time in a long time she wasn't just surviving, she was slowly, carefully beginning to live again. Back in Lagos, life was no longer the same for Tund. For years, he had lived like a king. Fancy cars, expensive suits, loud laughter in restaurants, people calling him boss. But what no one knew was that behind that image, his hands were dirty. The same hands that once struck Amara were also signing fraudulent deals, cheating business partners, and intimidating anyone who dared to question him. He thought he was untouchable. He thought he would never fall. But karma has its own timing. It started with whispers, rumors about shady contracts and stolen money. Then came an investigation. One by one, his secrets began to surface. Former clients came forward, workers spoke out, and even people he had once scared into silence finally found their courage. The man who once looked so powerful suddenly looked small, cornered, desperate. And then the biggest blow came: charges of fraud and assault. The same violent temper that Amara knew too well had followed him everywhere. Women began to speak out. Stories spread of the bruises, the threats, the abuse. What he thought he had hidden was now being shouted on every platform. His face, once on posters for successful businessman events, was now on the news with headlines like, "Tund arrested for fraud and domestic violence." His money drained quickly. Business partners cut ties. Friends disappeared. The same people who once raised glasses to him at parties now acted like they had never known him. Even his family, embarrassed by his shame, stepped away. The empire he built on lies and cruelty collapsed brick by brick. Tund, the man who once controlled everyone around him, now sat in a cold cell with nothing but regret. But even regret couldn't save him. He had laughed when Amara cried. He had ignored her pain. He had raised his hand against her without thinking twice. And now those very hands were chained. When the news reached Amara in Enugu, she sat in silence for a long time. She didn't laugh, she didn't celebrate. She simply placed her hand on her stomach and whispered, "God fights for the broken." It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. She realized that she didn't need to lift a finger. Life itself had handled the man who once thought he was bigger than everyone else. For Amara, this was closure. Tund had taken away her peace once, But now he could never touch her again. His downfall was a reminder that no matter how strong evil seems, it never wins forever. And for the first time she felt truly free, not just from his house but from his shadow. The same hands that once tried to break her had become the reason for his own destruction. That was karma, pure and undeniable. The day Amara gave birth was the most emotional day of her life. After months of pain, fear and struggle, she finally held a tiny warm miracle in her arms. A healthy baby girl with bright eyes and the softest little fingers. Amara looked at her daughter and whispered the name she had chosen long ago. Zuri. In Swahili, it meant beautiful. And that's exactly what this child was to her. Beauty born from brokenness, light after darkness. When Zuri cried for the first time, Amara cried too. Not tears of fear but tears of victory. She kissed her baby's forehead again and again, promising, "I will protect you. I will give you the life I never had." At that moment, the wounds of her past didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this new life in her arms, her second chance at happiness. Raising a child alone was not easy. Nights were sleepless, money was still tight, and her body was exhausted. But every time Zuri smiled, Amara felt strength she didn't know she had. With each passing day, she became more determined to give her daughter a bright future. That's when she made a bold decision. She took out her father's property documents and used her inheritance to start something of her own, a small boutique. With her sewing skills and creativity, she transformed an empty space into a colorful little shop filled with unique designs. At first, it was just a few dresses on display, but soon word spread. People loved her style, fresh, strong, and different. Customers began saying, "Go to Amara's boutique. She has magic in her hands." For the first time in her life, Amara experienced real independence. No one controlled her. No one told her what to do. She earned her own money, paid her own bills, and provided for Zuri with her own hands. She was not just surviving anymore, she was thriving. The community admired her. Some admired her designs, others admired her courage. Women whispered her story with respect, saying, "She left and built herself back up. She's stronger than ever." Amara had become more than a tailor. She had become an inspiration. Every evening after closing her shop, she would carry Zuri home, tired but fulfilled. She would sit on the veranda of her father's house, watching the sunset, her daughter giggling in her lap. Those moments made all the struggles worth it. Amara's boutique grew slowly but surely, and with each new stitch she made, she wove together a life of freedom, dignity, and hope. She wasn't just Amara the girl who escaped, she was Amara the mother, the businesswoman, the survivor. And as she looked at little Zuri, she knew one thing for sure. Her daughter would grow up never doubting that women are strong, powerful, and capable of rewriting their own stories. Amara looks straight into the camera, her eyes firm but full of emotion. She takes a deep breath and begins to speak, her voice steady but carrying the weight of her past. "I was pregnant when he hit me. I remember holding my stomach and thinking, what if I lose my baby tonight? That was the moment I knew I couldn't stay. One night while he slept, I packed my small suitcase, took my ultrasound photo and walked out into the dark. I didn't look back. I left with nothing but a secret and the hope of protecting my child. Today I stand here with my daughter in my arms, running my own business, living my own life. And I am proud that I chose freedom, proud that I chose to fight for myself and my baby. If you are watching this and you feel stuck, I want you to remember something. Your story is not over. You still have power even if it feels hidden. You are stronger than the pain, stronger than the fear. One decision can change everything. I know because I lived it. Her eyes soften, but her tone sharpens into a call to action. If you believe no woman deserves abuse, if you believe every woman deserves safety, type the name of your city in the comments. Let's show the world that we stand together, no matter where we are. Because silence protects abusers, but our voices, together, can protect women. She holds Zuri close, kisses her forehead, and ends with a final line. "My name is Amara. I am not a victim. I am a survivor."